For years, the DEA had been told that the fentanyl epidemic was fueled by shadowy labs no one could ever find. But what unfolded was the most successful and patient tracking operation they had ever mounted against fentanyl traffickers. A precise and relentless campaign built on 6 months of intelligence and cooperation. The breakthrough began not with dramatic shootouts, but with silence. Analysts spent months mapping small anomalies in cartel activity, containers of precursor chemicals arriving at odd ports, jungle airstrips suddenly lit up at night, local fishing villages receiving cash infusions that didn't match their economies. The cartels had grown wise to raids of the past, so this time, patience was the weapon. The cartel's belief in their own invisibility was their greatest weakness. Surveillance shifted from roads and cities to the sky. High-resolution satellites scanned dense foliage where no human eye could penetrate. They weren't looking for buildings, but for heat. The infrared signatures of chemical reactions burning through the night, too regular and too intense to be jungle fires. Each signal tightened the noose, shrinking the search from hundreds of miles of forest to a handful of coordinates. What the jungle tried to hide, technology hunted with instinct. They thought their code was unbreakable, yet DEA analysts intercepted and decoded the chatter. Hidden in mundane exchanges about construction materials and agricultural shipments were signals about logistics. Shipments timed with moonless nights and coded references to security perimeters around gardens. Every line of communication became a thread, pulling investigators closer to the hidden lab. They built a picture the cartel believed was impossible to see, a ghost image of their own operations. Still, technology only painted half the picture. The other half came from human presence in the very terrain the cartel controlled. DEA operatives disguised as hikers and eco-tourists walked treacherous jungle trails, documenting strange convoys moving quietly at dawn and spotting armed men pretending to be farmers. Local informants risked their lives, whispering about strangers who never left the forest and pointing to paths that didn't appear on any map. Each detail confirmed the puzzle pieces already in play. The DEA wasn't gambling, it was confirming. The cartel's myth of invulnerability was now a liability. They weren't working alone this time. Mexican authorities, long fighting their own uphill war, coordinated cross-border intelligence. International partners added resources, satellite time, intercept stations, logistics. The traffickers had survived by relocating labs across borders, but with cooperation spanning nations, their escape routes shrank. What was once a maze of safe havens became a trap.
Before we get to that, I need your help. I'm trying to hit 50,000 subscribers by the end of the year, and I need your help. So I would really appreciate it if you could subscribe and help me out.
Every border crossing became a surveillance point, every supply chain a monitored artery. The cartel's agility had met its limit. The emotional stakes were never abstract. Every day the lab operated, fentanyl shipments crossed into communities where overdoses surged. The DEA's patience was a moral weapon. Each delay, a painful necessity to save lives. By the time the final raid was authorized, the jungle lab was not a mystery. It was a confirmed target. The raid, guided by weeks of exact coordinates, heat signatures, and communication intercepts, was a lesson in inevitable consequence. Armed teams moved in with precision. Helicopters cutting through the night, while ground teams advanced silently along trails charted by informants. When they arrived, they didn't find an empty clearing or a decoy shack. They found the real thing: rows of chemical vats, precursor stockpiles, and generators humming with traffickers caught off guard. Years of evasion collapsed in hours. The cartels thought they controlled the tempo, that they could shift routes and watch raids fail. The DEA flipped the script, embracing the slow burn and letting them believe they were untouchable while quietly closing in. The hunters became patient predators, and the prey never saw the trap until it snapped shut. The success was not just about one lab destroyed, but about proving that even the cartel's most sophisticated camouflage could be pierced. The combination of long-term intelligence gathering, satellite surveillance, electronic intercepts, human reconnaissance, and international cooperation formed a new blueprint. It wasn't brute force, but patience. Not luck, but method. The message was clear. Fentanyl production could no longer hide indefinitely. The DEA managed to pierce through the jungle's secrecy by combining satellites, drones, and local informants. Each of these methods alone would have fallen short, but together they created an unstoppable net of surveillance that finally exposed the exact location of a hidden fentanyl superlab. The jungle, once the cartel's shield, became its trap. It began with satellites. From hundreds of miles above, orbiting lenses stared down at the jungle where human eyes could see nothing. The terrain looked uniform, but satellites carried sensors designed to detect anomalies invisible to the naked eye. When the DEA studied heat maps, a strange pattern emerged. The jungle should have cooled after sundown, but one section glowed hotter, as if engines or furnaces were burning. The heat signatures were a confession only technology could hear. A heat signature alone was not proof, so drones were deployed. The DEA launched small, unmanned aircraft outfitted with infrared and thermal imaging cameras into the dense airspace. Unlike satellites, drones could fly close, circle targets, and stream live video. They revealed temporary structures hidden beneath the canopy, smoke vents camouflaged to blend with treetops, and faint paths cut through the undergrowth. Even more telling were the human movements. Shadows at night, figures working around equipment, and vehicles with blacked-out lights. The drones transformed satellite anomalies into undeniable visuals of cartel operations. Technology had a clear view of what the jungle tried to conceal. Yet technology has limits. Machines see patterns, but they don't understand motives. To validate what the satellites and drones had found, the DEA turned to a more dangerous resource: informants. Trusted locals, often living under the suffocating pressure of cartel presence, came forward with whispers of a secret facility. They described unusual truck convoys that vanished into certain roads and the unexplainable presence of armed guards in unimportant areas. This human intelligence provided the missing puzzle piece, confirming that the images were not just signs of industry, but signs of a fentanyl lab operating at a massive scale. The power of the operation lay in this synergy. Satellites isolated the area, drones confirmed the activity, and informants validated the meaning. What took the cartels years to build took a three-step triage process to unravel. The DEA's raid was not a symbolic gesture, but a direct strike at the chemical heart of the fentanyl crisis. When agents stormed the site, they discovered not just equipment, but tons of precursor chemicals, the lifeblood of synthetic opioid production. Without them, cartels cannot manufacture the powder that later floods streets in New York, Los Angeles, and Chicago. Every barrel and container seized represented millions of potential doses that would never reach the streets. The chemicals captured were the essential building blocks without which fentanyl cannot exist. Taking them off the market forced traffickers into a desperate scramble, delaying production and forcing them to expose weaknesses in their smuggling networks. The DEA was pulling out the first domino in a chain that stretched from jungle laboratories to American neighborhoods. Break the first link, and the entire chain wobbles. For every ton seized, the downstream effect is exponential. The DEA wasn't just interrupting a single operation. They were disrupting the flow of death into the United States.
Before we get to that, I need your help. I'm trying to hit 50,000 subscribers by the end of the year, and I need your help. So I would really appreciate it if you could subscribe and help me out.
The cartel's business model hinges on the uninterrupted arrival of chemicals shipped in bulk, and seizing precursors before they can be processed is a choke point in the entire system. Finished fentanyl is nearly impossible to stop, but precursors are centralized, stockpiled in large volumes before production. Strike here, and you strike at the root, not just the branches. This raid also pierced the cartel's image of invincibility. For communities poisoned by fentanyl, such strikes serve as proof that the fight is not lost. For the cartels, the message is chilling. Their most secretive investments can be burned to ash overnight. This was not a small operation with a few barrels and improvised equipment. It was industrial scale, sprawling tents, sophisticated machinery, tanks filled with precursor chemicals, and armed guards. For the cartels, it was a billion-dollar heart-pumping synthetic poison. For the DEA, it was the kind of target that represented both an enormous opportunity and enormous frustration, knowing that this single victory could not end the crisis by itself. The DEA's strike removed a vital artery of production, but cartels are resilient. They operate like multinational corporations combined with insurgent armies. When one lab is destroyed, another appears. When one route is shut down, they carve out two more. The jungle lab was one head of a hydra. Cutting it off did damage, but the beast remained alive. Because multiple cartels relied on this lab, its destruction reverberated through the underworld. Rival groups suddenly lost access to the steady flow of fentanyl they had depended on. Smugglers faced delays, shortages, and logistical chaos. Prices fluctuated, shipments were missed, and trust between factions was strained. In the short term, that chaos mattered. It meant fewer doses on American streets. It meant cartel bosses scrambling to reorganize their supply. The DEA's operation highlights a problem-solution paradox at the heart of the fentanyl crisis. Tactical strikes are necessary, but no single strike, no matter how successful, can solve the crisis alone. The fight feels endless, because cartels have developed redundancies that allow them to absorb catastrophic losses. Losing a single super lab is a setback, but their networks can replicate production elsewhere. The DEA's raid on the jungle super lab was a confrontation with layered danger: booby-trapped terrain, armed guards, isolation, and the crushing demand for precision. This wasn't just another raid. It was a mission into one of the deadliest environments on Earth. The terrain was wired with death, tripwires, landmines, and improvised explosives. Moving through meant advancing inch by inch, scanning with metal detectors and probing rods. The jungle itself was an enemy. Dense foliage, mud that clung to boots, and swarms of insects. The air was heavy, choking, filled with the stench of chemical runoff. Backup couldn't reach them quickly. Medevac was nearly impossible. Yet, the mission demanded surgical accuracy. They had to move silently, slipping in under cover of night using advanced night vision goggles and encrypted comms. A single flashlight beam or careless noise could unravel the operation. The emotional weight of the mission was immense. Agents knew failure meant fentanyl would continue to flow into American neighborhoods. The fear wasn't just of dying out there, but of letting the poison escape. That knowledge made hesitation impossible. It forced them forward into lethal ground, because turning back was unthinkable. For the agents, survival wasn't just professional, it was personal. When the breach came, it unfolded like controlled chaos. Inside, rows of chemical vats and pill presses churned out poison in industrial volume. With practiced efficiency, agents secured the site, destroyed production equipment, and gathered intelligence. The payoff wasn't just the destruction of a lab, it was the prevention of countless deaths downstream. Each kilogram of fentanyl seized represented millions of lethal doses. Families who would never know it owed survival to those silent, sweating, battle-scarred hours in the jungle. For decades, the fight against narcotics was defined by intercepting the flow after drugs were already manufactured. This latest operation breaks from that legacy. It represents a strategic pivot to strike the source before the poison ever reaches the borders. The logic is simple. Traffickers can change routes, but they cannot manufacture drugs without labs. This shift transforms a temporary disruption into long-term damage against the supply chain. By focusing on these labs, the US isn't just trimming branches, it's attacking the root of the tree. This pivot wasn't possible decades ago, but technology has rewritten the playbook. Drones and satellites make hidden production sites visible, no matter how deep in the jungle they lie. You cannot reroute a destroyed lab. By striking production, the US forces cartels into a corner where adaptation is slower, costlier, and riskier. The old cat-and-mouse game of trafficking interdiction was endless. Production targeting changes the dynamic. This strategic shift is a decisive piece of a broader layered approach. Without precursors, labs fail. Without labs, there are no shipments. Without shipments, street-level dealers lose supply. The DEA's Project Wavebreaker aims to dismantle every layer of the synthetic opioid pipeline, and targeting labs magnifies the effectiveness of every other effort. The emotional weight of the shift is profound. For years, people lost faith that the fight could ever turn. This new focus provides a sense of regained control. By striking at production, authorities are finally matching strategy to the nature of the threat. The emotional payoff is tangible in the lives spared from overdose, in the communities that can begin to recover, and in the shift from reactive desperation to proactive control. This is not just another raid, it is a marker of change, a signal that the war on fentanyl is no longer about chasing shadows, but about erasing them at the source. The strategy has shifted, and with it, the possibility of a different future.